Whilst he's only been in Parliament since 2019, he's made a big splash in a short period of time. Following his surprise victory in Ipswich, a historically largely red seat, where he unseated the Labour MP Sandy Martin, this keen Brexiteer has been campaigning for global Britain, doing his bit to battle against extreme political correctness in institutions like the National Trust as part of the Common Sense group of backbench MPs. And he's also been concerned about the impact of COVID measures, including lockdowns. He abstained in a vote preceding the second national lockdown. He's a member also of the COVID recovery group. So I'm delighted to say my 10 p.m. guest is Tom Hunt, MP for Ipswich. Hello, Tom.
Good evening. Good evening.
Sorry to drag you out on a Sunday night.
No, it's a pleasure to be here. Obviously, back in Parliament tomorrow.
Yeah, so it's a bit of a school night, really.
Well, I'm all raring to go. It's always a school night for an MP, though.
It is, really.
Even if Parliament's not sitting, we've all been working hard in our constituencies. It's just a different type of work.
And of all the times to become an MP, 2019, in which your first challenge is to get Brexit across the line, which you and the government did, which is a huge achievement, and I think it will stand to Boris Johnson. And then the pandemic.
Yeah, I mean, we had sort of 2 or 3 months of Parliament as normal. We were just understanding the various procedures, how Parliament worked. And then, of course, that completely changed and all the different rules. We've been working with different rules in Parliament for the last year or so, and actually there's going to be a refresher session early this week so we can learn how it's done. And there's all sorts of differences between how it operates. But no,
even the dress code will be a challenge.
For some colleagues,
Zoom sessions in your pyjamas.
I think I was always quite good. I was always quite well dressed. But some colleagues perhaps do need to have a reflect upon what they might need to do differently when it comes to their attire when we get back to Parliament. But we got elected. We got Brexit done pretty quickly, 2 or 3 months normality. And I think perhaps a lot of people thought once Brexit was done, after all the drama between sort of 17 and 19, that actually this might be quite a calm Parliament.
Yeah.
And then, of course, COVID happened, and it's been an incredibly unusual time to be a Member of Parliament, particularly a new Member of Parliament.
Frustrating not to be in the House. And I think actually the optics of so many members absent, it's not a great inspiration to the country, is it? And don't you think it's time now for everyone to get back?
Well, that's what's happening. So tomorrow, we had a taste of it with the debate a few weeks ago,
so that was good
where we had all MPs in there and traditional rules, much more cut and thrust. I mean, it's a debating chamber primarily, and it's about holding the executive to account. And at times, during the pandemic, it was like a silo speech chamber. People would do their kind of 3-minute virtual speech and then they'd go.
Yeah.
So there was there's limited interventions. There wasn't that flow of debate, which I think is so important, to holding ministers to account.
And if MPs can't all get back to work, then why should the rest of us?
Well, exactly, yeah. So I'm very glad, actually, the Speaker has been so firm in saying that it's completely back to normal from tomorrow, and so it should be. When
did you first conceive the idea that the UK should leave the European Union? Have you always been a Brexiteer?
I wouldn't say I was actually an MEP candidate in 2014.
Did you do a Boris? Did you write 2 articles?
I wouldn't say that, but
Eeny, meeny, miny, mo.
I was always a Eurosceptic. I think my view was always I thought leaving would create some short-term challenges and disruption.
Yeah.
But ultimately, I decided to take the plunge and vote leave and campaign for leave because I thought if something is at heart flawed and wrong on first principles, then you've got to change it. And I also felt that was one opportunity to sort of get off the train going in one direction. I think if we'd voted to stay in then, it would have been carte blanche, ever closer union, and it would have got worse and worse. So I'm incredibly glad that as a country we took that opportunity and we left the European Union when we did. And actually, we've got I think a proper Brexit with a deal that the Prime Minister secured.
Yes, and do you think that decision by the British people, by a majority, to leave has been vindicated with examples like the row over vaccine supply with the EU?
Well, I think obviously, the vaccine rollout has been a success. I think that the Brexit helped that, and I think that the idea that you can make decisions quickly, be nimble, I think that was demonstrated through the decision we were able to make on. And I think if we'd still been in the European Union, I think we absolutely would have been part of the European Medical Agency approach to the vaccine, and that would have meant a much slower rollout than we've had. But I think obviously, the power is in our hands to make a success of Brexit. There will be challenges, but ultimately I think in the medium to long term, it would be a great success for this country, to be an independent country again, able to make our decisions, able to control our borders, control our money and control our international trade. Of course, we do need to take action on immigration, particularly illegal immigration, to make sure that we can realise those benefits.
What are your thoughts about the supply chain crisis that's happening at the moment in the UK? We've heard from an industry professional who said that we might not get a Christmas turkey this year.
I'm sure we will get Christmas turkeys. I think.
Can I hold you to that?
Well, there's quite a few turkeys in the UK, isn't there?
Yeah, it's true.
There's quite a few turkeys.
Very true.
I think there's quite a few turkeys knocking about Suffolk whenever I'm driving around.
Definitely. No shortage. But there are concerns, aren't there, about empty shelves and what might happen in the run-up to Christmas?
Well, I think that we'll be able, businesses and the government will be able to overcome those challenges. I think that.
Do you think we need to loosen or change immigration laws and visas to get people in?
I think. To be honest, I think on immigration, I think we probably actually need a cap in terms of immigration. So I probably, we want people to come into the country to contribute and make a positive contribution. But ultimately, the reason why a vast majority of people voted to leave the European Union was to end free movement, was so we can control immigration. And I think that, if as a government we can't demonstrate to the public that we've done that, then I think we'll pay a price for that. So it's very important that we control immigration. Yes, we want to be open to the brightest and the best. We want to come here and make a positive contribution, but we've got to demonstrate that control, which I think is what people want. Yeah. It's not being pro or anti-immigration.
Yeah. But hold the line and keep the Brexit vision, something suggested by Richard Tice earlier in the programme.
Yeah, but part of it was about immigration. That is one of the reasons why many of my constituents voted to leave the European Union. It was about control of immigration.
So, therefore, what we have to do is solve this supply chain issue without creating free movement by the back door.
Yes, that's got to be the aim, because otherwise I think it would be a breach in the spirit of Brexit.
Yeah.
And so much in politics is about trust. It's why the Labour Party got such a big problem, because it's about trust. And as a Conservative Party, we do not want to go down that same route.
When did you come out as a Conservative?
Very early on, actually. It wasn't really a... they say if you're sort of, left-wing... If you're not left-wing when you're young, you haven't got a heart. If you're left-wing when you're older, you haven't got a head. Well, I've always been a Conservative, actually. It's just always been the way it has been. I guess I've probably moved a bit about... I think I had one stage where I was a bit of a sort of red Tory communitarian when I was at university. And then I guess now I'm probably more sort of like conventional Conservative. But, the Conservative Party is a broad church. I think you might look at me and say, he's a right-wing Conservative because he's got this particular view on this issue. But actually, I think you might be surprised by some of my views on other issues. One of the principal reasons why I'm in politics is special educational needs. At school, when I was 14, had a reading writing age of an 8-year-old. Yeah. I've got dyslexia, dyspraxia, and for me, that is probably my number one burning passion is special needs. People might not always see me talking about that at the national level, but, so I think we're all complicated. We all have different views on different issues. So I don't think it's best to pigeonhole people in terms of being a left-wing or right-wing Conservative. For sure. And you mentioned your dyslexia and dyspraxia, and it's a great career you've had, and now you're in Parliament, so you've prevailed over some of those challenges. Does it make your job harder? Yes, I'm not particularly very organised. I'm not good with process. I'm not a linear thinker, so I'm not like... I couldn't do my shoelaces until I was really quite old. I couldn't do my tie until I left university and things like that. But I actually am very positive about special needs. I think actually if young people and adults are given the right support, they can be amongst the most creative, unconventional thinkers. Because there are other strengths, and some people consider it to be a superpower. It is. It's like, I spoke to a group of autistic young people in my constituency, and I said, weaponise your autism. Yes. You're a great creative thinker, but that's only if they get the support they need. If they don't get the support they need, so often they end up in a totally different place. And we're doing on the Education Committee, we're doing an inquiry member on prison education, and about 40% of people in prison have got learning disabilities. So the stakes are incredibly high. Get it right, you can, for society, utilise fantastic talent and creativity. Get it wrong, and it can go in a very different direction. The stakes are incredibly high. There's a very fine line between going that way and another way. We need to get it right. Do lockdowns work? I think the lockdown, particularly the sort of January lockdown, I think was necessary. But I think obviously now we've got the vaccine, there's no point for lockdowns. And I would seriously struggle to vote for any further restrictions now we are where we are with the vaccine. Because the bottom line is the vaccine is effective at preventing serious illness and tragic death. Which is the key thing. Yeah. Which is that was the reason why we locked down in the first place, to save lives. Yeah, and of course, with case numbers at this level, before we had a vaccine, with case numbers at this level, we would have had, sort of near 1,000 people dying a day, huge pressure on hospitals, but we don't because of the vaccine. So, I see the vaccine as a great success. I don't... see any conspiracy there. I see a fantastic triumph, and it's why we're sat here. You know, it's why we're able to see our loved ones again. And and I think a vaccine's been a very positive thing. I'm very positive about it.
For sure. Do you think that lockdowns, though, were a mistake? You abstained on the second national lockdown, then you accepted the third national lockdown. Of course, we were told, weren't we, before Christmas, that the NHS was, 10 days away from being overwhelmed? You
know, I think most members of Parliament, I really struggled with many of the votes that I took part in. I remember one day I had Zoom meetings with my constituents, and I literally went from having one meeting with the hospitality sector in Ipswich. It's an incredibly sobering discussion. Many people who had poured their entire lives into their businesses, who were desperately concerned about the future of their businesses and their livelihoods. They're incredibly close to the edge, some of them. Yeah. And then I went and had a meeting where I was talking to the relatives of individuals who actually died from COVID. So within the space of 2 hours, I'd had those 2 meetings, and I was incredibly conflicted, which is why I took a decision on the second lockdown, which I'm not a sort of abstaining type person. No. It's quite an unusual decision for me to take. But I think, obviously, when the Kent variant came and it just took off in a way that it did, you know, last summer, some of us thought that was sort of the end of COVID. Some of us thought that might be the end of COVID. I remember I actually got away on holiday last summer, and I thought, that would be the first of many. And I thought, but of course it wasn't. But we are in a incredibly different position now because of the vaccine, which is why I've had my 2 jabs, and I would encourage everybody else to.
For sure. So what about COVID passports, which have been green-lit, we're told, for mass events, football stadia, festivals? Why do we need COVID passports if the vaccine is so effective?
Well, I mean, I think the first thing to make clear is I don't think anyone's suggesting sort of COVID paper passports to get into pubs and restaurants and things like that, which is at some point. So that's what people were concerned about at some point. I mean,
domestic.
That isn't going to happen. We have them for international travel. I use one.
And we have no choice. It's out of our hands.
Yeah.
But it is in the government's gift to decide whether to create that infrastructure here. And once we've got it, we'll never lose it, will we?
I think there's no reason to believe we wouldn't lose it. I think that we've had a whole load of restrictions in place, and we've dismantled virtually all of them, and we're living in a much more freer society today than many hoped to believe a few months ago.
And the Prime Minister was warned against Freedom Day. It was called reckless, but he was vindicated. Cases fell.
Well, the Leader of Opposition said that it was inevitable that cases would be 100,000 a day.
Yeah.
They weren't. Of course, he didn't have a benefit of hindsight when he made that particular prediction. So I think maybe it was the one time that Mr. Hindsight departed from hindsight and he made a mistake. So maybe he might go back to that strategy.
Yeah, he was off-brand there for a while.
He was off-brand, so he might return to that now.
But many of my viewers, so many emails coming in, really unhappy about vaccine passports. And I know it's not your exclusive personal responsibility, but the public will be interested to take your view. Laura has said the vaccine passport will be the poll tax moment for the Conservatives. People will remember this at the ballot box. Are you concerned? I mean, I just wonder how necessary they are.
Well, I don't think people will remember it at the ballot box, because we don't know when the next general election is going to be. It could be 2 years, could be 3 years.
So what are we talking about? 6 months of requiring your vaccine status for?
Well, I think a lot of sort of say Premier League clubs are already doing it. But I think if it is, it does look like this is going to happen for mass events, large events. I mean, personally, I would like it to be kept to an absolute minimum and it to be phased out as rapidly as possible.
What would your preferred timeline be?
As small
months
time as
rather than years?
Months. Absolutely not years. No, I wouldn't.
Well, we had 3 weeks to flatten the curve.
I wouldn't.
How did that work out?
Oh, well, it was a lot longer than that. But we have to bear in mind, though, that virtually every country approached tackling COVID in exactly the same way. And in fact, you look at what Australia and New Zealand do at the moment. We complain about certain restrictions still being in place here. You look at what's happening in Australia and New Zealand. We're in a much better position.
Props to the government. I've said it on this programme that we wouldn't actually enjoy the freedom we currently have, which is still relative freedom. But if it wasn't for the Prime Minister, a bold decision to ignore the siren voices of some sage modelers and also the opposition and most of the media, I would suggest.
Yeah.
And it was a ballsy decision. It was a libertarian decision, and I think we've benefited. I mean, I'd love to know the advantage the economy has had as a result of being able to get back to a degree of normality. But we know that the vaccine has a degree of efficacy in preventing serious illness and death, but it's not great for stopping transmission, and that dilutes the vaccine passport argument.
Well, I have to say, there's been... I heard a previous guest just before me talking specifically about the Delta variant.
But I think,
but I think that there are many instances where I think it's been proven that it does cut transmission. So I think on balance, I think the vaccine
fundamentally, do we need these vaccine passports?
I think, obviously, this would be a decision for the government scientific advisors who've got all the evidence and data in front of them, and they will make their recommendation. And I believe there probably will be a vote in the House of Commons.
What happens with your vote, do you think?
Well, I'm obviously going to be thinking incredibly carefully about it, my constituents.
Because you've been brave in the past, and you abstained against the second national lockdown, and you must have received some opprobrium from that, perhaps from some of your colleagues. You might have threatened your political career by abstaining, but you're a person of principle and you were concerned then. So are you concerned again now about COVID passports?
I'm nowhere near as concerned about COVID passports as I am about lockdowns. I mean, obviously, lockdowns in terms of their impact on businesses and people's liberties are far more significant than the COVID passport.
So you really think these COVID passports could be time limited? That's
genuinely
your contention. I do. Because cases are bound to rise every winter. Coronavirus
all
will
the
the next 5 years there'll be a crisis in the NHS. At that point they'll go, well, look, let's keep the passport.
But all the time our understanding of COVID is increasing. It's getting better. We're learning more about the virus, more about how we combat it. The vaccine will be enhanced, improved. So it won't be exactly the same.
But then you'll need a passport to prove you've had the booster.
Well, I think we're learning more all the time. I do not see these COVID passports as being long-term.
So if the COVID passport was a sort of 2, 3, 4 year project, it's a no from you.
Well, I really struggle. If it was like we need these for 2 or 3 years, then I'd very much struggle to.
And why has the Coronavirus Act? Why is it going to be renewed?
I think it's been necessary. For the government to because
it's licensed to lock down again, even though you've said we don't need to.
Well, we don't need to.
So why legislation enables that?
I really struggle to.
I think it'd be great if it didn't pass, because then we know there are no more lockdowns.
Yeah. Well, I can't see there being another lockdown. I think if I look to the future, I think very.
What's the percentage chance of a winter lockdown?
Of a full-on lockdown like last time?
Yeah.
I mean, it would only happen if there was a totally mutant variant which fully evaded the vaccine. I mean, that's the only way that it would happen. And I think that I'm not an epidemiologist, but my understanding of how viruses is actually incredibly unlikely to happen. So I think that worst case scenario, there might be the worst case scenario might be some mild restrictions, but I'm hopeful that's not going to happen.
So you feel you're hopeful we're through the worst of it?
Absolutely. I mean, all the data looks positive. I think we're seeing a slight increase in cases at the moment. But as you say, the key thing is hospitalisations and deaths. The connection between the three of them has changed dramatically since the vaccine came live. So, I think I'm quietly optimistic that we are on the straight and narrow now. And because so many of us have been living half lives, we've been living half lives for too long.
Yes.
And there's been immense suffering caused by that. Immense suffering.
It's good to hear a politician say that. What do you make of Boris Johnson? What's your appraisal of him as Prime Minister? He's good at winning elections, isn't he? Yeah. But what about the bit in between, running the country?
I like the Prime Minister. I think he's a good Prime Minister. I voted for him to be the Prime Minister. I attempted to vote. I would have voted for him to be Prime Minister when he stood just after Brexit as well. I think he delivered Brexit, a proper Brexit that people said was impossible. They said that he wouldn't do it. He did it. He achieved it. I think he has a remarkable ability to connect with people. I think he's a man of vision. I think he sometimes makes mistakes, like anybody does. And I think anyone who'd been in the chair of being Prime Minister over the last few years would have made mistakes. But on the whole, I think he's definitely a force for good, and he has my full support. I'm hoping he's going to come to Ipswich fairly soon. He said he's going to come to the BMX track.
And do you think well, look, I'm sure I would like to see him on a small bicycle.
He said he's going to come. So
pretty sure he wears a helmet.
Well, no, yeah.
I know he's got quite a big hairdo, but I think we need to we need help.
He also I think he's had some incredibly. I think it's also important to remember the Prime Minister the scale of the things he's had to decide and deal with over the last since he's been Prime Minister. Brexit, COVID. And he's got more of those issues down the track, of course, as we'll see this week.
Yeah. Margaret Thatcher, who I'm assuming you admire.
Of course, yeah.
She was the queen of the reshuffle.
Yeah.
Why doesn't Boris Johnson fire people?
Well, I think he probably wants people to have time to get to know their brief, get to know the departments.
Dominic Cummings, ill-fated trip to Barnard Castle, the humiliating Rose Garden press conference, Priti Patel, the English Channel migrant crisis, Gavin Williamson, exams fiasco, Matt Hancock, snogging in a corridor.
I think there's a point.
He didn't fire any of those people?
I think there is a point about, when you're in the middle of a pandemic, is that a good time to start chopping and changing all the time? We saw with Tony Blair that when he was Prime Minister, as a reshuffle every other month. There was no continuity within departments. If you're a minister, a cabinet minister, you've got a whole department of civil servants there who may or may not be on the programme. I think you've got to have ministers who can get to know the department, get under the skin of that department and drive it. But whether the Prime Minister has a reshuffle over the next few weeks, that's up to him to make that decision.
Yeah.
Obviously, I want to see people in place who are delivering for the country and delivering for my constituents.
What are your ambitions? You're going to be in the politics for a long time.
My ambitions are to get
cabinet.
No, my ambitions are to get rid.
They always say that.
No, I think being a member of Parliament, if you do it properly, is a huge job, a huge responsibility, and a huge honour. I'm still trying to get my head around the enormity of it. And I'm focused on delivering for my constituents in Ipswich. It's a great place. I'm honoured to represent it. Fabulous place. So I would love to deliver locally, do a really good job, and then be re-elected by them. And if they keep on sending me back to Parliament, then who knows, frankly. But at the moment, I'm just very focused on, obviously being part of these national debates, which is my job, but also sorting out potholes in Ipswich, getting more money for our police, getting £25 million deal, getting better special educational needs provision for youngsters in Ipswich. Those are the things that I'm passionate about. I'm very, very, it's the oldest town in the country. Colchester claim they are, but of course it was sapped by Brexiteer, so it's not a continuous history. Ipswich is the oldest continuous history. A great football club, not great at the moment, but great heritage.
Sure.
And of course, as a Newcastle fan, I appreciate the Bobby Robson legacy as well. So, that's my focus.
Yeah, Newcastle staying up this season.
Well, it's not looking great, is it? Really, I think we've last weekend was looking so good because Newcastle were 2-1 up against Southampton and Ipswich were 2-1 up against Wimbledon, getting into injury time, and then they both conceded a goal in injury time. But I would love Ipswich to get promoted to a championship this season, Newcastle to stay where they are in Premier League. Of course, Ipswich Wanderers, who are the second team in Ipswich, who I visited earlier this week, have also got their own promotion hopes, and they're looking to go up a division as well.
There you go. That's 3 teams you're supporting. You've got a full in tray. Tom Hunt, brilliant to have you in the studio. Thanks for giving up your Sunday evening. Good luck in Parliament tomorrow. My thanks to Tom Hunt, Conservative MP for Ipswich.
Welcome to the GB News YouTube channel. You can watch us live 24 hours a day, catch up on your favourite shows, and join in the conversation in the comments below.
Don't forget to subscribe and you'll never miss any of our exclusive content.